Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by the fabulous Kirsty Rogers. Kirsty is the executive head of Manchester's office at DWF, which is a globally recognised law firm. Not only does Kirsty head up the exec side at the Manchester office, but she also wears a number of different hats, including being board trustee for WeMindTheGap, board member for the Northwest Academies Trust, or NWAT. She's also chair of the Board of Governors at Delamere Academy and on the Board of Trustees for Vision for Children. Frankly, I don't know how she fits it all in, because I know at the moment things are super busy as an employment lawyer, given the time of crisis that we're in. So very appreciative of her joining us here today. So Kirsty, welcome to the show.
Hi Leila, lovely to meet you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're most welcome, and thank you so much for being here. I know that we've chatted offline, and I've had the opportunity to learn about many of the different facets of your life, and actually I think it's really quite interesting hearing not only about some of the pieces that you have on the personal side, but also how on earth you manage everything that you're doing, from a holistic point of view, given what's happening at the moment. I know that you're being approached left, right and centre and working God knows how many hours given this pandemic. But I wonder whether, just for the benefit of those tuning in today, whether you might be able to kind of give a bit of a brief, almost synopsis of your background and how you came to be where you are today, and how you came to be wearing all these multiple different hats and be so involved in the world of diversity, inclusion and belonging, in addition to your job.
Well, I'm quite lucky in that my job as an employment lawyer lends itself very well to diversity. So my day job, as it were, and my core job as an employment lawyer includes a lot of discussion around diversity and equality, which has always fascinated me in any event. I also am of an age where I've been around so long that I've met a lot of people and I get asked quite a lot for advice and support, and that has naturally led me into different roles. I'm not very good at saying no. In fact, my sort of motto for life has been, if there's an opportunity, give it a go, see where it takes you. It can only broaden the mind. My husband likes to say, will you stop saying yes to everything? But actually, that's why I've had such a varied life. And I find that quite often the roles I do cross over and they're useful to one another. And the fact that I've got quite a low boredom threshold also feeds into me doing all these different things because I can try out lots of different things. But I am fortunate in that the roles I do cross over and are interlinked, and I can put to use some of the skills I've got in one place in the other roles. They're all hugely interesting, and I also have a need to feel needed, and that's probably an insecurity on my part, which drives me to do more and to try and make a difference, because that makes all of us feel better about ourselves, I think.
Thanks so much for sharing that, and I just love that. It's just beautiful, that piece of vulnerability there. And I think deep down, and probably everyone who's listening is thinking, me too. No, actually, I think we all as humans feel that need to want to belong or want to be needed. And I guess clearly you're appreciated, because there's so many different people that rely on you for so many different things. That's really fantastic. And I guess I'd also, if you don't mind me saying so, I'd never guessed that you would feel that need, given you have been so successful. And I wondered, because you did law when you were at university in Sheffield a number of years ago, whether it was, did you always kind of want to be within law? Was that kind of the designated path? Because as an outsider looking in, it looked very kind of, linear, straight up into the portfolio, and it's kind of, has it been as easy as it looks, or have there been challenges along the way?
I certainly didn't have my career planned out for me, and even recently, I would say I still was deciding what I was going to be when I grow up. I did law at university because I thought it would give me the greatest options in terms of another career, because I am quite indecisive and didn't know what I wanted to do. And after university, I was offered a job through a sports club. Actually, I played women's rugby, and they offered me a training contract through one of the partners there. Worked at one of the firms, and I ended up as a paralegal, and then decided, well, I might as well qualify, and then I did, and the rest is history, really. It certainly wasn't what I always yearned to do, nor what I thought I would necessarily be best at, but it has been a great career, and I have worked with a lot of very fabulous people and lots of people within the community that I work in, which has enabled me to have a variety of different roles, which is extremely privileged in this day and age. So I have a good job, I have interesting work, and I'm able to do things for other people. So I don't think you can ask for more, really.
Wonderful. And I wonder, because I know that you are an expert, especially when it comes to kind of gender inequality and kind of really almost balancing those scales, especially when it comes to making sure that people are not being discriminated against and such. Was the interest in kind of being on the gender diversity side because of any personal experiences? And also, what have your observations been as you've gone up throughout the ranks in your career? You've kind of looked and worked with all of these other leading global organizations and things like that. What have been your observations when it comes to pieces around the gender parity piece?
Again, I think I've been quite lucky in terms of the support I've had and sponsorship I've had through my career, but I don't think that's been as equal for other people in other organisations, or even as I've gone along through different places, in terms of both men and women, and I've seen that, but not for any obvious reason. So I'm not sort of saying that what I've witnessed generally has been outright discrimination, although there is some of that, but the way in which businesses work has naturally meant that opportunities are not as easy, or haven't been as easy. They're becoming easier for women than men because of the roles that we play in society. So it's been a journey in terms of, well, what can we do to change the dial and make sure everyone has an equal opportunity and that we get the best out of everyone, and making sure that actually people can succeed as themselves and not as somebody else, or behaving like a man, for example, to get to where you think you need to be, but behaving as yourself to get to that place, and understanding that different styles of leadership can work equally well, but all are needed. And so that has fascinated me, and because of my role in looking at case law around discrimination, and then looking at my leadership role and the leaders that we've got and who's coming through, and the proportion of men and women in law, etc. How do we encourage that? I've been able to do that within the organisations I've worked in, but also through other organisations as I've advised them, and then through education. Looking at the communities I've worked with around what they are doing to make sure things like unconscious bias are understood and dealt with in a different way, so that we get greater engagement across the board from everybody as you go along, if that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute sense. And like you, I fundamentally believe that education is the cornerstone to really getting people to fully understand and then engage, because long gone, I suppose, are those days where beating people with sticks to make them do certain things is actually going to work. It's almost like you said there, bringing people along that journey so they can really see the actual, whys and the how. Then they can look at the world almost through a different lens. Now, I know that you're working with some very, very high profile kind of FTSE Fortune kind of organisations, which I know that we can't mention here. But I wonder whether you can talk me through some of the pieces that you have done with these organisations when it comes to kind of unconscious bias, when it comes to some of the pieces that have been the kind of, I suppose, the real watch-outs when it comes to discrimination and things that companies really need to be addressing. Because for those that are listening in, who maybe don't have some of these pieces in place, I'd be curious for them to kind of learn more about why they should be investing in unconscious bias and why they should be really doing this, and then maybe how, because tangible tools, tips, real life case studies and methodologies are a really fantastic way for people to learn.
And I think it depends on the organisation and their approach to it, but fundamentally the world has changed massively, even more so in the last month or so. But even before then, where the world of work was even 20 years ago is very different to where it is now and where it's going to be. And businesses need to understand where they are in that change and what they've done to prepare for that change, as well as what they're going to do to prepare in the future for that change. And a lot of that is about understanding who they've got to work with and how they can get the most out of them. And if you don't understand the decisions that you're making and why you're making them and the bias you've got in relation to them, you will continue with the same decisions you've always made, which are probably not fit for the future or should be altered for the future, because the future is a very different place. And I think an acceptance of everybody for who they are will get the best out of people, and will also make you more attractive to a wider pool of talent, and assumptions that people make, for example, possibly in relation to people who've got disabilities or people who need to work from home in the future need to be challenged. So the stereotypes that you have of, if you're at home and you've got young children, you're not going to be able to focus as much as other people, and you can't travel abroad. That needs to be challenged in terms of, well, is that really the case? Don't you just give everybody the option and see how they manage, rather than apply your thought process before you engage with the people that you work with? I'm not sure if I'm making that very clear.
No, you're making absolute sense. You're basically saying we need to challenge stereotypes, because unfortunately they have existed, and it's not a blame game that we are saying here. I think it's the understanding for organisations to realise there's so much untapped talent out there. And I mean, let's face it, Kirsty, you're a wonderful example of living proof that actually you can have, multiple external roles, hold, very senior position, and also look after a family as well, which is ultimately, what perhaps thoughts of yesteryear's leaders might have said, well, that's impossible.
Well, and I think also being able to accept that you're not going to do everything perfectly, but you don't let perfect get in the way of progress is my motto.
I love that.
Just do the best that you can every day, and get other people to help you, I think, and not be I think humility is a big thing. Being able to say, well, I can't do it perfectly, I need your help with this, and understanding what you do well and what someone else can do to support you, and giving people the credit for that. I think that can be a huge benefit both to you and to them, in terms of helping other people up and helping people see that they can do it. What I find with women in particular, but also men as well, is confidence can hold people back, and they don't want to admit that they are worried about something, so they possibly don't do something because of their anxiety about it, instead of trying and saying, well, it may not be perfect, but here goes, let's give it a go. A bit like this interview, Leila. So
You're absolutely fantastic, and again, it just it baffles me. But again, I shouldn't kind of stereotype there that those in senior positions, will not automatically kind of have that confidence. At the end of the day, we we are all human, and we should really be kind of be kind to ourselves. But I think it's a very interesting point there that you mentioned about confidence, and actually it relates very specifically, to the piece that you said earlier about the fact that it's okay to lead in different ways. And I think I said this when we were last speaking, that I personally felt that. I think, spending a lot of times in boardrooms with my other hat on, which is, of course, executive search, as you know, spending a lot of time in boardrooms with mainly what would be kind of middle-aged white guys, many of whom I think are fantastic. So, kind of disclaimer there. But you find yourself behaving in almost a beating your hands on your chest kind of guerrilla mentality often, because you feel the louder you are, the more you might get listened to. And I think what you said about being authentic and actually finding almost what it is that makes you stand out for being yourself is critically important. Not only is it critically important for self-fulfillment and happiness, because I was desperately unhappy trying to fit in for many years, but I think you kind of take so much energy pretending to be something that you're not. I mean, they say it's 30% worth of your energy is sucked up by fitting in. For those minority groups that are trying to fit in, is 30%. And you think, wow, God, if that went into productivity for all the people that feel or have felt anxiety or not, like they haven't belonged into a particular group at work or at school or whatever, be very, very different.
It's exhausting trying to be something that you're not, and then but having the confidence to be yourself is also quite hard. And I think that does come with experience. You do worry less about what people might think about you, but it is still there. And I am astonished at the number of leaders, particularly women leaders, who don't have very much confidence. In fact, the more senior they are, the less they seem to have. And it's certainly before the pandemic completely kicked off, we were due to have a confidence conference within our firm for people on our promotion programs and women coming up to the higher levels of responsibility and management within the firm, to talk about confidence and how we can make the most about that and give people a chance to be themselves and succeed as themselves, and look at a support network around that, because I think that's hugely important. And I set it up because more and more people were coming to me to say, I'm worried about this, and my confidence is low, and I'm really struggling. And it was an ongoing pattern. It was affecting everyone, including me, and was not just limited to our organisation. It certainly seemed to be prevalent in a number of places. And that's not to say it's limited to women at all. It absolutely isn't. But there is certainly a group there that needed some support. So start there.
I love that terminology. And in fact, anyone who's listening in, you should all have a confidence conference. Excuse me. That's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I think, it's almost, and I think it is a humanistic thing here, isn't it? That you just presume that everyone else has got it and you haven't, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And the more that we talk and the more that we share, that we realise actually everyone is not perfect. We all come in different shapes and different sizes, and we all walk our own different walks, don't we? And so, being that, I guess, is absolutely okay. And I guess before we run out of time today, because there's a whole number of things that I really would like to ask you, Kirsty. In fact, so much that I could do another podcast with you quite happily. But I wondered whether you might be able to kind of just share with our listeners any of the top tips that you have learned yourself, because as a female myself who also battles with confidence issues and trying to push to break out the the parapet, when other people are watching, especially in this social media savvy world that we live in now, what are some of the top tips for women or indeed men that are not only lacking in confidence, but kind of thinking, hey, I'd like to be at that level one day. And, it might be easy for someone to say who's at that senior level right now, but how can I get there if I'm not there already? What else can I do?
I think taking any opportunities that are offered to you is really important, but also connecting with people at your early stage of career, because those people also move up with responsibility as time goes on. So keeping your connections close, making as many of them as you can, taking the opportunities that you can, not being afraid to fail, and staying with yourself, stay with yourself and who you are, and develop your confidence around that. Asking for help is another thing that it can be hard to do, but is really, really important.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. And just before we whip into the lightning round, I guess, I should mention here, I know we've talked a lot about kind of gender diversity, and to a degree kind of discrimination, but so many different wonderful things that I encompass diversity, inclusion, and belonging, be it physical diversities, be it kind of invisible diversities. I know, Kirsty, you're very passionate about many different areas, including including children and kind of parenting, which I think this flexible way of working, which more so now with given COVID-19 is kind of very, very important. I wonder whether we could kind of chat a little bit just about that before kind of going into the lightning round.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of flexible working over the years, even before COVID-19, although it is on a grand scale now. And that's enabled us to attract and retain people whom we may otherwise have lost because of caring responsibilities. And I think not just caring for children, but possibly caring for parents now as well, or elderly people. So I think sort of flexible working is a huge way of engaging and retaining people. I think it also enables you to have more of a work-life balance, but invariably people who have other obligations are get better or are better at managing their time because they have to be. Once you are faced with having to take on other responsibilities, you naturally become better at managing your time. It doesn't mean that you're any less effective in the role that you do. It's just that you have to be more organised about it. I'm far from perfect in that respect, but I can focus better and prioritise better than I ever used to be able to prior to having children. And in the same way, I can prioritise their stuff. At the moment, I'm sorting out their timetable for the day with homeschooling, and then what I've got to do, and making sure that we're up in time to get them started, and then I can go and do calls and then go back to them and make sure that I'm around when I need to be around, but manage that alongside my husband, who's also at home, and the time that he can give to them. But so the whole thing is a measure of communication and cooperation, taking responsibility and organisation. If you can do all that, you're generally pretty good at your job. So I have to say the content of my children's lessons is probably the hardest thing I do every day at the moment.
I love that phrase though, communication and cooperation, and I think that probably rings so true for many who are listening in. And I have to say, I haven't got kids yet, which I think I mentioned to you when we last spoke, but I can't wait to have children. And I always admire, and I'm slightly fearful of the time when it comes to be balancing everything. So I think, oh God, I'm so busy right now. How on earth to fit in children as well? But clearly it is possible. The art of the possible is possible. So thank you so much for sharing. And just quickly, last couple of questions into the lightning round, but I wonder, first and foremost, I know it's quite a big question to ask, but what has been, if there's one kind of secret that you had to success, what would it be?
Secret to success, I suppose I'm quite resilient and just keep going. I never give up, really. I do keep on and on until I get a job done. It's very straightforward. There's nothing magic about it, Leila, at all.
There isn't anything magic about it, but it is amazing how many people do give up when the times get tough. And it's one of my favorite questions. It's so simple, but I interview, as you know, lots of CEOs and C-suite inspirational leaders like yourself. And I always ask them this question, and resilience always comes up, as well as hard work. Resilience or persistence, because ultimately there's similarities, but he or she who continues on will eventually get there, as opposed to that person that might be really smart but just can't be bothered to find the answer. So I completely agree. And who's been your biggest inspiration as well in your life, be it personal or professional?
Probably my dad. Sadly, I lost him quite early on, but he was inspirational in terms of, there was nobody who loved his job more. He was an environmentalist in the end and worked with nature, but he loved it and made that obvious to everybody and to us, and we learned a lot from him. And he was always there for us as well, constantly supporting us, constantly telling us we could do stuff. I suspect that's where I got a lot of it from, is that he was always there saying, hey, you can do, and supporting us no matter what. But being very passionate about his own work and what he could do for the environment. So that I would say he was probably my biggest inspiration.
That's so lovely, and I'm sure that your children are getting the benefits of everything that you've learned from your father as well. But yeah. I completely concur. Family is just so much the important thing, and I think there's no one more great really than the parents. But finally, I wondered, before we wrap up for today, if you were to go back many years, when you were, I don't know, perhaps at university back at Sheffield, and you were talking back to the young Kirsty, what advice might you have given your younger self, or indeed anyone who is listening in or about to embark on a corporate career thinking, what am I going to do?
I think stop worrying about what people think of you. For a long time, and even now, I'm really affected by people's opinion of me, when I should just get on with what I know is right and what I think is the right thing to do, and not worry so much about the impact it might have. And I think that goes back to confidence, but I generally think stop worrying about what everybody else thinks and do what you know is right and what you think is the best thing to do.
Thanks so much, Kirsty. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks, Leila.
By way of a quick summary, as I usually do, and there's loads of great nuggets of wisdom here, but the things that really stood out for me is you can be a fantastic leader and still have a huge amount of humility, which Kirsty, you have got in abundance. You're kind of, very, very humble about, many different things, about wearing all these different hats. And I just love that, and I think it's important for leaders to have that and to remain grounded, as kind of normal people that others can look up to and still relate to. So I just absolutely love that, and I think sharing some of those personal pieces there, especially around the gender diversity side, I think it is so important. I mean, ultimately 50% of the population are women, and so we really do need to give a leg up to those who might be struggling, especially when it comes to the confidence piece, and and I guess also saying yes. I think that's another thing that's come out of today, and I hope this podcast has inspired many people who are thinking, oh, should I, shouldn't I, don't know if I've got the confidence to do it or not. Put your hand up, say yes. What's the worst that can happen? You are human at the end of the day. It might be scary reaching out to people for help, especially more senior people than yourself, but remember, they're only people. The worst they can do is say no. They probably aren't going to anyway, but stick with people that have got great ethos, great morals, great leaders, and ultimately keep on being resilient, keep on saying yes, and make sure you give back. I think it's more poignant now than ever before, given the coronavirus situation. And so hopefully this podcast has inspired you to get up and say yes to one other thing that might be coming into you, because you never know where it's going to take you. Thanks so much again, Kirsty. And Thank you. My name's Leila Mackenzie-Dellis, and you've been listening to the podcast show Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. We're with you every week, although we're here more frequently due to the unprecedented times at the moment. You've been listening to the fabulous Kirsty today, sharing some really great tips and tricks here. If you'd like to check out anything that we talked about in the show today, they'll all be in the show notes on our website, so don't worry if you've not managed to write everything down. Visit www.dialglobal.org/podcast or www.leilamackenzie.com/podcast, and we'll put all the show notes in there for you. You can also reach out to myself with any questions, and or Kirsty as well. She's very, very busy at the moment, so if she takes a while to come back to you, don't worry. But again, if you have been affected by anything in today's show, please make sure you speak out and get in touch. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.